Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Welcome back to Blue Boards. This time we're going to be checking out Lux Aeterna, made by Tony Boydell, art by Alex Lee, and published by Capstone Games. This here is a solo game. Your spaceship has basically gone to hell. Everything's falling apart, you're drifting towards a black hole, and you've got about 10 minutes before the entire ship falls apart and you end up drifting out into the vacuum of space. So you need to stop this via playing out the cards. If you manage to get through the entire deck, well, congratulations, you win. If you manage to repair enough of your systems so that more systems don't end up falling apart than repaired, you also win. But if too many systems fall apart, if you run out of time, or if you drift into the black hole, you lose. So it ends up being a bit of a game of spinning plates, maintaining your systems, keeping away from the black hole, and making sure things like glitches don't come out of the deck in order to punish you too severely at the very least. But honestly, the game is a good time, and it does it in a few interesting ways. The main thing being that each card has all the different things you need to worry about on it, whether it be a useful effect, anything between re-rolling dice to flipping dice to their opposite side in order to really get an up on their durability, to moving you away from the black hole, to removing glitches, to things along those lines. But at the same time, they've all also got a system that starts falling apart that you need to pick from something that hasn't been repaired already, if possible. And a number that determines how far you move towards the black hole, and cards will often be good in 2 or even 3 ways. Like, one will cause you to not take any damage to your systems, not move close to the black hole, and it'll have a really good effect on it, and you need to decide which one of these you're going to use, and you need to decide which one to do it with fast. And it means that every time you pick up a new hand, you have to be scanning those particular parts of the cards really fast. You need to be slapping them down as fast as you can, and any mistake that you make can come back and haunt you later on. For example, the systems have the ability to both be repaired, which will give you a positive effect, and they'll fall apart, which will give you a negative effect. Like power, for example. I think one of the examples of that is if you repair it, you get 5 cards per turn, but if you let it fall apart, you only get 3 cards per turn, so you'll be going through the game faster and or slower. So it creates this really interesting balance where you need to decide whether or not you want to start repairing systems. You want to try and just hold it back so that you can use your abilities to go through the deck for glitches, or you want to try and stay as far away from the black hole as possible, and sometimes you'll go too far in the one direction and you'll be scrambling towards the end of the deck because you'll only be 2 or 3 spaces away from the black hole and you'll need to just try and not fall into it. It creates this really interesting tension, and I think it wouldn't work without the timer. Now, admittedly, when you put this at 15 minutes, it's too easy. You have more than enough time to read the effects, read the cards, and figure out what you're going to do. You're never going to get the same deck every time because you always get different glitches. They always recommend you randomize the different systems. In fact, I'm using what they call the insane variant in this video, where I can't see what the benefits and what the downsides are until I repair or lose the system, so it makes things interesting in that sense. But the more that you push it, the more interesting it becomes. You can even choose to start closer to the black hole for a score bonus, which I think is an interesting concept. And so, as a result, I've been slowly working my way up the game. I've been learning what the different cards are and what they do. Even though you only see 52 of them in a game, you put 8 out at the start of each game back in the box, so you don't always get exactly the same set of cards every time. But I've been learning like how to keep myself away from the black hole, what's worth taking, what's not worth taking. And I've slowly been increasing, or should I say decreasing, the amount of time that I have. I've managed to successfully win a couple of 10-minute games, but in this video I'm using 11 minutes just so I can like compensate for the fact I'm doing this on the other side of a camera. But the game itself is just actually quite fun. Going through this deck, needing to make these decisions on the fly, especially when you're using the face down cards here so you don't know what's going on, well, right up until you flip them over and find out. I find that to be really interesting and it really adds to the tension of the game. And the basic plate spinning is really good because the fact that all of these cards can do one thing or another, and you have to make that choice with the 4 that you've got every turn, and sometimes you just have to make a really tough choice, like willingly letting a system fall apart because you have to get away from the black hole, or you see a glitch coming in the deck and you need to get rid of it. And so, as a result, I find myself enjoying this pretty much every time I play it. I do have some problems with it. My main problem with the game is the fact that it just turns into a score attacking game once you get good enough. And the way that you score is thus. You get 7 points for each system that you manage to successfully repair, 1 point for each system that hasn't fallen apart yet. You get minus 10 points if the glitch error comes up and you choose to take the 10-point penalty. And you also add how close you started to the black hole. But if you play with any of the variants, like having a shorter time limit, like having the systems cards face down so you don't know what's coming, and therefore make the game harder on yourself, seeding in more glitches into the deck when you start, starting with one system already collapsed. And they recommend all these variants at the back of the manual, so it's not like I'm just pulling this out of my butt. You don't get any points for any of that, which is weird. You'd figured they would have done that in order to give it the most score attacking potential possible, and I really wish that they did. It feels like a missed opportunity. And while the art is okay, I think it's meant to resemble some kind of like space pulp from a few decades ago. It does the job well enough, but you're never looking at it. Because since you're on a clock, you need to be looking at the top right corner and the bottom of the card and nothing else. Everything else is just kind of a distraction. So you need to avoid that as much as humanly possible. And they do recommend that you look up a soundtrack for the game, which I could not find. It mentions in the manual to go look one up, but it's not listed on their website. I had to go looking around for it for ages until I found something on Spotify, and I don't have a Spotify account. So there you go, that kind of sucks. But the base gameplay they got going on here is pretty good. However, I would like to see one more thing added to it. I mean, I can keep making the game harder for myself by decreasing the time limit, by starting closer to the black hole, I should say. And I'm already doing the face-down systems things. But I gotta say, like, if there was an expansion that added like one more mechanic and scored more things like your time limit and whether you chose to have these ones, randomized ones face down or whatnot, that would make things more interesting for me, to the point where I'd be happy to recommend it like right off the bat. However, this is also a relatively cheap solo game. Setup time isn't that bad. It's just 100 cards. The box isn't overly large, so it's easy enough to carry around somewhere if you need something to keep you distracted. And, oh yeah, there is one other thing that I'd like to complain about as well. The dice are fiddly as hell. They're tiny and they're very light, so it's very easy to like knock them about while you're trying to get something else done, or when you're trying to roll them and put them back on the cards or something like that. Doesn't help that I've got absolutely massive hands, but considering that this is meant to be like a real-time game, it kind of makes it a little bit of a problem, especially for someone like me who's a little bit clumsy with this sort of stuff. But honestly, it doesn't get in the way too much, and I have managed to win a 10-minute game with a couple of honest screw-ups, and I don't mind that in the slightest, really. So yeah, that's Lux Aeterna in a nutshell. There are a couple of things that annoy me, like a lack of scoring opportunities, fiddly dice, and the fact that it could do to be a little bit more complicated. But I enjoy what it's got going on. The decision making that you need to do while under that time pressure is really enjoyable. Being able to make the game harder and harder for yourself is interesting and creates that feeling of progression. And it's nice and small and relatively cheap, so I find it hard to really have a problem with recommending it. I'd call it my favorite small box solo game at this point. Under Falling Skies appears to have fallen backward a little, but still, this is pretty damn good at what it does. I enjoy it, and I'd be happy to recommend it based on the fact that it's nice and cheap. I'll let you watch the rest of this run. There's a little bit of tension on whether or not I'll make it, but you'll get to see. With that said, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.